Hey, I'm Ben. I'm the owner of Illumined, and I want to kick off our inaugural video on YouTube with one of my favorite stories from my career working with retirement communities and people with dementia. And it starts way back in the beginning, probably 20, maybe a little bit more years ago. And it starts with my initial job when I started in the industry was working in training. And so I was brought in as a writer and a teacher, and my first job was putting together an orientation program for new employees at our communities. So I was testing it with our community, our very first community that we had, that was across the street from our corporate office. So I went over there and I was running an orientation for some of their new employees. And part of the orientation was a tour. And so, around lunchtime, right after lunch, we'd get up and, work off the sandwiches or whatever we had that day, and walk around the community and just see what this new place was they were working in. And so we went through the dining room and we went through the activity center, and we got to see where the residents had their religious services, or where their dances were held, or where the piano was located. And then we went, we'd go through the independent living, and then we went through the assisted living, and finally, toward the end of the tour, we got to memory care. And so we went into the memory care building. We were escorted in. It was a secure area. And so they got to meet a couple residents and, just see how it functioned there. And as we were leaving, my career flashed before my eyes, because I was, it was a secure unit. We had to, we couldn't, once you open the door, you'd open it and close it. So there were several people coming out, and, I was holding the door, and here come the attendees, and, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the last person coming right out the door, motoring behind, was a resident who had dementia. And of course, so I just barely noticed before she got out the door. And so my options are, let her come out or smash the door into her face, which was obviously not acceptable. So she came racing right out after the next person. And I got to learn a really amazing lesson about communication that day, because first off, much to their credit, unbelievably, I was so grateful. There were a couple caregivers who saw right away what had happened and were just out the door to assist. It was amazing. I was so grateful, saying their praises to everyone who would listen. But it was a really interesting thing that happened, because the first person out the door, the first caregiver out the door, went up to the resident and said, Barb, you can't be out here. You've got to go back inside. And you could just see, kind of her chest starting to puff out, and you could see her fists kind of start to ball up at her sides a little bit. And, you could tell she was just winding up to say, who are you to tell me to go back inside? And then right at that moment, the second caregiver got there and said, Barb, don't you remember? I mean, you told me we're having spaghetti tonight, and you told me you were really excited about that because it's your favorite thing. Don't you want to go back and have dinner? I mean, you can't do that if you're out here. And no kidding, the person right on the spot said, why didn't you just say so? And walked right back in the door. And it taught me a really important lesson about communication that day, that none of us, whether we have dementia or not, like to be told no, or like to be told you can't do that, or like to be talked down to. And so instead of that, if we can replace it with something where, we started out that first one, you can't be out here. So I'm on one side, you're on the other side. We can only have one winner here. Either you go in and lose, or you stay out here and win. And that's a really bad situation to set up, right? And then the second caregiver came out and instead provided a win-win situation. Hey, you wanted to go have spaghetti, right? That was your big win, right, Barb? Wouldn't you like to go do that? Oh, well, yeah, of course I would. And so with that little shift, we got the same task accomplished, but in one way where we're telling and not really taking the other person into account, it's not going to go well, and it's going to be really difficult for everyone. Where if we redirect and get us back on the same side with the other person, now we're both going toward the same goal. Now we both want to achieve the same thing. The resident and the caregiver, they both want to go back inside. And now we've had a pretty well done situation where everybody gets what they want, everybody gets to be happy, and it's an excellent caregiving moment.